welcome back to another episode of 6 Degrees of Associations. We're excited to once again kind of go a little bit internal here. We did bring the news a couple months ago about how Core Affinity has actually acquired a few other partner companies, and Joe Bates, who's here with us today, is part of one of those partner companies, the Big Red M. Did I get it right, Lucas?
Big Red M.
Okay.
We can drop the
Big Red M. Okay, but it is the Big Red M in the industry. So we're excited to welcome Joe, one of our colleagues here, our Chief Research Consultant. And I'm kind of excited to jump into the topic today. But first, let me just let you, Joe, have an opportunity to tell us who you are, what you do, how'd you get here?
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. I'm very happy to be here on the podcast today. So thanks for having me. I've been in the research world for almost 30 years now, and about almost 25 of those years, I've been working either on staff at associations or I've been consulting with associations. A couple of the associations I worked on staff at are the Consumer Technology Association, the Global Business Travel Association, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. So I've pretty much done any kind of research and consulting you might need when it comes to associations. And
Sure.
In 2016, I started my own company, and a few years ago, I started partnering with the Mori company, which is now turned into the Big Red M.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, that sounds so exciting because that is such a breadth of different opportunities, different organizations. And so am I reading it right that you've gotten to have this fun career where you've just done a bunch of research in a bunch of different fields? It sounds like my dream job. How did I not know about this?
Yeah, absolutely. Worked with different associations in different industries. And then when I've been consulting, I've worked with pretty much every type of association you have out there, trade, professional, different verticals. It's been great. There's always something new and challenging, and I learn things constantly.
I will say, Lucas, from the months that we've been doing this, which is now probably 30 or 24, 30 months, something like that we've been doing this show. Just for those who are listening and might be considering a career in associations, before we get to the meat of the topic today, it is wild how different and varied the organizations can be and the subject matter. Yeah. So to all of you out there who are potentially considering a job in the association world, take that into consideration. Really neat how you get to just explore a lot of different industries and a lot of different expertise. But let's jump into this research component, because I know that, Lucas, as you and I have talked before, we talked about non-Doozapalooza. We've talked about different affinity marketing programs, different ways in which to retain members, different things. We've had topics on digital marketing and content marketing. Yeah. We've had topics on white papers and content and just everything. So this sort of combines all of the aspects that we've talked about for how associations need to be thinking of retaining members, acquiring new members, raising sponsorship funds, developing really solid evergreen content. Joe, can you talk us a little bit through what is the world of sponsored research?
Yeah, it's a really unique and particularly beneficial program that you can set up at your association. And it can provide you with non-dues revenue. It can provide you with content for your members. It can provide you with information and data that you can use with the media, with policymakers, regulators, and really establish yourself as a thought leadership while bringing in additional revenue for the organization. So that's sort of the 15-second elevator pitch, if you will.
Yeah. On the core side, Aaron, we talk about the win-win-win, scenarios that we've set up with program providers, and that we're bringing new business to suppliers. We're bringing value adds through the association, and we're bringing, unique contract and discount to the members. This is sort of the likeness of that on Big Red M side, in that we get to provide research and content for the association. The members who are members of that industry and association get to benefit from that. And ultimately sponsors get to come in and then be a part of that to sort of ride along to not take credit, but sort of showcase along with the association what's being done and promote their own value within the industry. So Joe, maybe talk a little bit about how you landed on this, your history in sponsored research, and then if you can throw out an example that can be sanitized, that we're not throwing anybody out there that doesn't know it.
Sure. Well, one thing I can speak about is my experience at the Global Business Travel Association, where I actually created their research program for them. They didn't have a researcher prior to me. So I worked with the executive director of the foundation, and the first year we had about $100,000 in revenue from sponsored research. So that's sort of one key piece, is that it starts small. You can't just roll something out and all of a sudden you're going to be raking in millions of dollars. This is something that you have to nurture over time, but it can pay big dividends. And so we had a sponsored research program where exclusivity was key. There's two types of sponsored research programs. One is non-exclusive, the other is exclusive. So if you have companies that can sponsor big dollar amounts, you can have an exclusive program. And over the course of 5 years, we built this program. And by the time I left, we were bringing in $1.5 million in revenue from this sponsored research program. We were producing over 100 reports every year. Now, not all of them were actually sponsored, but the money we made from the sponsored research funded all the other program activities that we undertook on behalf of the association. So that's a real life example of something I did. And so now I've turned this into a program that we can replicate in association after association. So it really doesn't take any upfront cost. You just need some staff time to help get the ball rolling. And at Big Red M, we have sort of two pieces that help to make this program a reality. We have the sales side, so we can develop and sell these sponsored research programs, and then we can fulfill the research itself. And again, because of the experience we have had creating these, it's turned into somewhat of a turnkey solution for us, but it's brand new really for the association community.
Yeah, I keep coming back to the value add of the content. Who, in your mind, Joe, who really wins the most? Because in my mind, the association is getting access to industry-wide information that they can use for their own purposes to drive and make decisions at the highest level. The sponsor, I would imagine, can help focus the program in some regard on where within the industry, and so they could get some valuable insights from that. And then, of course, the member is learning more about what's going on in their industry from a qualitative or quantitative aspect. So who wins the most? Yeah. Or is there, because there's clearly not one winner.
No, there's a lot of winners, and I couldn't say one is a better winner or wins more than the other. There's a lot to go around. This is, I think, part of the beauty of the program. So as the association, you're becoming a thought leader in your space, the go-to source for information and data. You're getting additional revenue in the tune of 25 to 30% of the total sale. You're able to use this information in terms of advocacy efforts with policymakers. You can use it in the media to elevate your awareness and recognition among your industry as well as the general public. So there's a lot of benefits for the association. The members get a tremendous amount of content and we typically give it away for free because it's being paid for already. So as a member, your membership is paying for literally hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of research that you would not be able to do on your own. So you're getting a ton of content to help run your business, to help understand the market, to dive deep into certain topics that you might need information on. Yeah. And if you're the sponsor, you're getting thought leadership recognition, you're getting information that you can then use as derivative works for your own marketing. You can get sales leads. It really helps position you not as a vendor, but as a partner to your industry.
Yeah. Well, I would say there's always the 1%ers, right? In anything, there's 1% of associations who could do this themselves, and honestly, we would encourage them to do so. If you have a research department on staff, and you're not doing this, this is something you could immediately implement. With you want to do some strategic planning, but and come to the right sponsor partners to make that happen. And then there's a piece in the middle where it really makes sense to look at this from maybe an outside or a fractional perspective, and then And then I imagine there's a low bar to this. Like, what does that magic sort of in between look like? And again, who the 1%ers know who they are. You have a staff, just turn to them and ask them if they're doing this already. And then who would be next that should really start looking at sponsored research?
Sure. Honestly, I think almost any association can engage in this, but there's a couple things that you need to have in order to make this work. Typically, it needs to be a trade association. Not always, but typically. And then you also need to have—
Why is that?
So the reason for that is that you typically need to have large enough companies within your space that you can get the sponsorship dollars that you need to make this program financially viable. A lot of professional associations are very niche, and they may not always have companies involved in that space that have deep enough pockets to fund this type of program.
Sure.
I'm
curious.
If there's one out there that's listening, I'd love to hear back from them.
Yeah.
I'd be curious. So go ahead, Erin.
I was just curious, from a publishing perspective, how do you suggest to normally work with the associations to be sure that there is a substantial amount of credibility in the work that's being done? Because a lot of times people will hear sponsored research, they'll hear advertorial, right? Like, how do you help draw those lines for the associations that might be like, oh, this is the reason we don't sell sponsorships. They'll think we have favorites within the organization.
This is the common question I get.
Yeah.
So the idea is you need to take more of an NPR approach, where internally you can call it a sponsored research program. And when you talk to the sponsors, you call it a sponsored research program, but you don't use that language externally. Sure. And the idea here is that you have to keep a church wall, a church and state wall between the sponsors and who's actually conducting the research. So that's why it's very, very beneficial to have an outside firm conducting the research so that you get that third-party credibility. You combine that research with the fact that the association is more independent than the sponsor would be themselves, and you really can develop a program with a lot of credibility. But that is something you have to be very, very careful about in your first year or two so that you don't get this perception that, oh, company X is just paying for the research and getting the results they want. You have to be very careful about that.
And do you help the organizations think through that? So obviously I'm an organization, I'm thinking, oh, this sounds really good, but I'm not even sure what angle in the business I would go after as far as research. Are you partnering with them up front to say, tell me a little bit more about your industry and we'll tell you what trends we want to study or perhaps what, vision forward thing we want to talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a few types of studies that any industry and association need. One of them is an economic impact analysis.
Sure.
What is the impact of your industry on the U.S. economy? How many jobs are you responsible for? What are the wages in your industry? How much taxes do you contribute at the federal and local level? This is something that every industry should have, just sizing your market. And this helps you as well when you're going to policymakers saying, look, this is who we are. This is who we represent. And when they hear about dollars, that's really important. So there's a few standard types of research studies that we would always say, let's start with this. But once you get past that, you talk with each individual sponsor and you ask them, what are your goals in your business over the next 2 to 3 years? Because we want to craft something that works for us as well as works for you.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that's important. That conversation with the sponsor and the association, I think the divide has to happen. There's got to be some integration there between those conversations, but not so much, as Joe mentioned, to allow that bias to sort of creep into the research. And I'll give Joe a lot of credit. We've only been working together for just under a year. I've watched him stand firm on a couple of these projects where they're asking us to do research, but on the stance that I'm only going to do this if you allow me to do it my way and you allow the data to be the driver and not the bias. So it's easy to sort of chase dollars as an association and say, hey, well, XYZ Fortune 500 company is willing to give us hundreds of thousands of dollars if they just do this. But if the content that you're putting out has a clear bias, the members and everybody else will sniff it out pretty quickly. And so the integrity of the data is really, really important, both quantitative and qualitative. And I don't know, Joe, if you could speak to, what does a qualitative aspect of research, of this type of research, look like, and what is a quantitative aspect? Like, what are some of those components?
Sure. So with the qualitative aspect, we tend to do more case studies. And these may be, let's take an example. In the engineering industry, you've got very large companies engaging in very large projects. And you might want to understand, is one particular approach to a project better than another approach? And there's, you can get in the weeds with that, which I won't do today. But in those situations, there may only be a handful of companies that you can actually research. And so you would want to do these case studies to really understand, hey, what worked well in this situation versus what didn't work well in another company's situation. On the quantitative side of things, you could do a consumer study that, let's say eyewear, I'm working with a client and they're a trade association in the optical space, and they want to conduct research that is relevant to consumers because their members care about what consumers think. So in that way, in that sense, you can do a quantitative survey, online survey among a representative sample of the US population and get a lot of really good, helpful information on behalf of your members in the industry about what consumers are doing related to eyeglasses and sunglasses and things of that nature.
It's really
I
cool.
think that's great. Yeah, I mean, I think being someone who has frequently been on the marketing side and in the product side of different industries, this is the type of information that's gold, right? And to know that your association or trade association could be the resource for that, as opposed to you having to go out and commission your own research, is a huge benefit, I would imagine, to members. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I think we have like 10 more questions we could ask you, but as usual, we're getting to our 15-minute mark here and we want to be respectful of your time. So I'm going to go ahead and do my usual, bringing the cane out onto the stage here and round us up. But Joe, we always like to hear from our guests on who they think we should speak with in the future. So any ideas on who maybe we should contact next?
Yeah, one of the companies that I work with and I love very much is Dynamic Benchmarking. And I would love for you to talk to Ray McDonald, who is the head of Dynamic Benchmarking. They provide a solution and a platform that I haven't seen anywhere else for associations that want to engage in some type of benchmarking. So that's who I'm recommending.
Oh, cool. All
Sounds
right,
great.
Ray. Well, Lucas, thank you so much for thinking up this topic and bringing it to my attention, certainly, so that we could have this conversation. Again, I have like 10 more questions I have for you, Joe, but we'll have to maybe do that in a follow-up. And Joe, thank you so much for being able to turn around quick on a dime here and be with us today. We appreciate it. And this was hopefully really insightful for a lot of our association audience out there to hear. We're in an age where we need to be thinking about content. We need to be thinking about sponsorship revenue. We need to be thinking about member retention. And this seems like a one size fits all solution that they should be thinking about. So thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Erin. I'd love to come back sometime.
Great.
Thanks, Joe.